"Commander, the humans are broadcasting again," Lieutenant Krevnar reported, his secondary breathing gills fluttering with mild irritation. Their global information networks are saturated with battle narratives. Zarvex moved closer to the holographic display, watching as hundreds of transmission streams flowed from the blue planet. The ship's translation matrix converted them into comprehensible segments, categorizing them by content. "Curious," he murmured, tapping one stream that appeared particularly popular. The display expanded, showing primitively rendered human figures engaged in what the translation identified as the Battle of Normandy. The images were crude compared to Siltharan historical records, yet something about them resonated with uncomfortable familiarity. "They recreate their wars for entertainment," Krevnar observed with disdain. "Primitive psychological processing, clearly. The trauma of their limited warfare requires cultural digestion." Zarvex wasn't convinced. Perhaps. Or perhaps there's something more. He gestured toward another stream, this one discussing strategies from conflicts called World Wars. The presenter, a grey-haired human male, described tactics that echoed advanced Siltharan military doctrine with surprising accuracy. "Bring me comprehensive data on human conflicts," Zarvex ordered. "Not just the intelligence summary, everything." While the fleet maintained standard approach formation, Zarvex retreated to his private command center. The walls illuminated with centuries of human warfare, battles fought with muscle power and metal, evolving into mechanized combat, then precision strikes. What struck him wasn't the technology, which remained laughably primitive, but the strategic evolution. The humans called one approach Blitzkrieg, a lightning war using concentrated force at weak points. Another was guerrilla warfare, dispersed units, exploiting terrain advantages against superior forces. The Siltharans had different terms, but the concepts matched military doctrines that had taken them millennia to develop. "Commander," the ship's system announced, "analysis complete. Human civilizations have engaged in approximately 15,000 distinct major conflicts in their recorded history." Zarvex's outer eyelids blinked rapidly in shock. The Siltharan Empire, spanning 17 star systems, had experienced only 300 significant conflicts in twice that time period. "Specify total casualties," he commanded. Estimated human conflict casualties, between 5 and 6 billion individuals. Zarvex's scales bristled involuntarily. The number approached the current total population of the planet. "They've killed nearly as many of themselves as currently exist," he whispered. He selected a data point on the historical timeline, something called the Somme Offensive. The statistics showed nearly 20,000 humans killed in a single day, fighting over a fragment of territory smaller than a Siltharan farming complex. On impulse, he accessed the cultural archive from the same period, finding something humans called poetry written by survivors of this battle. The translation was imperfect, but the sentiment burned through clearly. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Lieutenant Krevnar entered the command center, pausing as he observed his superior surrounded by images of human destruction. "Commander, invasion preparations await your approval." Zarvex closed the historical displays with a gesture. "Delay the approach. Standard orbit only, no lunar demonstrations." "May I ask why, Commander?" Zarvex turned to face his lieutenant, his expression unreadable to all but the most seasoned Siltharan officers. "Because, Lieutenant, I believe we may be dealing with something unprecedented. These humans don't just practice warfare. They've perfected it. These are from their Vietnam War," Tellamore explained, gesturing toward a collection of weathered fabric objects. The humans wore them to identify their military units. Zarvex examined the patches with their strange symbols and phrases. One depicted a skeletal figure holding a primitive projectile weapon. Another showed a winged creature clutching lightning bolts with words his translator rendered as "death from above." "They glorify death in their iconography," he noted, "yet your research suggests they fear it intensely." Telemor's scales shifted to a thoughtful shade of amber. "That's precisely what makes them unique, Commander. They embrace what terrifies them." She activated another display showing human medical technology. "Look at their surgical techniques developed during their world wars." Battlefield medicine advanced more in 4 years than in the previous century. Zarvex moved through the laboratory, passing display cases filled with primitive weapons, metal blades, chemical propellant firearms, rudimentary explosive devices. Each bore signs of rapid iteration and improvement. "This can't be right," he said, examining data on a conflict called the Cold War. "They developed planet-destroying weapons, then simply didn't use them." Mutual assured destruction, Telemor confirmed. They created a perfect balance of terror. Both sides could annihilate the other, so neither struck. That requires incredible restraint for such an aggressive species. Or perfect understanding of deterrence theory. Telemor manipulated the display to show overlapping strategies from different eras. The humans call it game theory. They mathematically modeled conflict outcomes centuries before developing space travel. Zarvex paused before a preservation chamber containing what appeared to be bound sheets of processed plant material. "What's this?" "One of their most significant military texts. On War by Karl von Clausewitz." Telemor carefully extracted the ancient book, placing it on a scanning table. Written nearly 300 years ago, yet it contains principles our military academy teaches today. She activated the scanner, projecting translated text into the air. "Asterisk war is merely the continuation of policy by other means." Asterisk. They understood the political dimension of warfare before they unified their planet. Zarvex murmured, reading further. "Commander, our standard protocols for planetary subjugation assume predictable response patterns," Telemor said, her voice lowering. "The Orvelians surrendered after lunar bombardment, the Tekari after atmospheric demonstrations. But humans," she gestured toward a timeline of Earth conflicts. "When directly threatened, they don't surrender, they unify." She displayed footage from historical archives, diverse human groups putting aside differences to face common threats. Their World War II involved multiple factions fighting across their planet. Yet when a single nation developed atomic weapons, the others accelerated their own programs within years. Their technological adaptation rate exceeds any species we've encountered. Zarvex studied the projected image of human resistance fighters from various conflicts, gaunt, exhausted figures continuing to fight against overwhelming odds. "What would you recommend, synanthropologist?" Telemor's scales paled. "Withdraw, Commander, or prepare for conflict unlike any in Imperial records." The High Command would never accept retreat without engagement. "Then modify your approach. Their history shows they respect strength but despise arrogance. Their greatest military victories came against forces that underestimated them." Zarvex's communication implant chimed with an incoming fleet alert. "Commander," came Lieutenant Krevnar's voice, "human detection systems have locked onto our position. They're broadcasting a message on all frequencies." "What does it say?" A pause. "It's a single phrase, Commander." The translation reads, "Come in peace or not at all." Impossible, Krevnar hissed, his scales rippling with agitation. The human craft shouldn't have penetrated our defensive grid. Zarvek studied the tactical display where 5 blinking markers indicated the paths of the human infiltrators. Their small vessel had somehow navigated through the fleet's overlapping sensor fields, evading detection until they were already boarding the scout ship Relentless. "Replay the approach vector," he commanded. The holographic projection showed the human craft using the debris from their own destroyed vessels as cover, pulsing their engines in patterns that mimicked the electromagnetic signature of the debris itself. "Clever," Zarvex muttered. "They're using our sensor algorithms against us." "Commander," the communications officer reported, "we've intercepted transmissions between the human vessel and their command. They're calling this Operation Trojan Horse." Zarvex felt his neck frills stiffen. Just hours ago, he had been reading about that very strategy from human historical records. A primitive siege, wooden deception, soldiers hidden inside a supposed offering. The humans were consciously drawing from their ancient warfare playbook. "Lock down all systems on the Relentless," he ordered. "Initiate remote purge-off." "Too late, Commander," the tactical officer interrupted. "The humans have already accessed the primary database. They've downloaded technical specifications for our propulsion systems, weapons arrays, and shield modulators." On the main screen, the small human craft detached from the Relentless, its engines flaring as it accelerated away from the fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for their technology. "They've already adapted our propulsion designs," Zarvex realized, within hours of accessing them. His communication implant chimed with an incoming transmission from the departing human vessel. Against protocol, he accepted it. A human face appeared on his private display, skin darkened by solar radiation, features set in what his cultural database identified as grim determination. "Commander of the Siltharan fleet," the human said, "consider this a receipt of your technology donation. We'll put it to good use." "You've violated our vessel and stolen Imperial property," Zarvex replied. "Return and surrender, or face annihilation." The human's facial muscles contracted in what the database labeled a smile, though it contained no warmth. "We call this reverse engineering, Commander. You'll find we're quick learners." Before Zarvex could respond, the transmission cut. On the tactical display, the human vessel vanished into Earth's upper atmosphere. "Pursue and destroy," Krevnar urged. "We cannot allow them to analyze our technology." "Unnecessary," Zarvex replied, his voice oddly calm. "Monitor their communications instead." The intelligence officer complied, routing intercepted human transmissions to the command center. What they heard confirmed Zarvex's suspicions. "Project Manhattan Protocol initiated," a human voice announced. "All defense contractors moved to Phase 2 integration. We've acquired the Rosetta Stone, people." Another voice, confirming parallel development tracks. "Teams Alpha through Delta will focus on propulsion, Echo through Hotel on weapons systems. Just like we drilled." Zarvex turned to his stunned officers. "They had teams prepared to analyze our technology before we even arrived. This wasn't opportunistic. It was planned." On the auxiliary display, Earth's defense networks pulsed with increased activity. Satellites repositioned, ground-based weapons platforms activated, and industrial facilities worldwide shifted production patterns. "Commander," Krevnar said quietly, "these preparations, they're consistent with what intelligence predicted would take months." "Yes," Zarvex agreed, watching as the humans rapidly organized their response. "But it seems humans have been preparing for this moment for centuries." Zarvex studied the translated text floating before him, its implications disturbing his usual military certainty. The human Sun Tzu had written these words over 2,000 years ago, yet they described with uncanny precision the current human response to Siltharan presence. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. He scrolled through additional passages, each more unsettling than the last. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. The humans have been analyzing Siltharan communications since first detection, building an understanding of their potential adversary before engagement. This wasn't mere coincidence. It was the application of ancient doctrine. Telemor's face appeared on his communication display. "You've read Sun Tzu's work?" "Yes," Zarvex replied, "but I found something else." A human military theorist named Clausewitz wrote about the concept of friction in warfare, the accumulation of unexpected difficulties that complicate military operations. "And its relevance, Commander." Zarvex gestured toward the tactical display showing multiple system failures across the fleet. "Our engines are experiencing unexplained power fluctuations. Communication arrays malfunction randomly. Navigation systems show phantom readings." Sabotage. Not directly. The humans released self-replicating code packets during their raid on the Relentless. These packets don't damage systems. They simply introduce small errors. Friction, exactly as Clausewitz described. Telemor's scales paled. They're applying 2,000-year-old and 200-year-old military theories simultaneously against technology they encountered for the first time days ago. "There's more," Zarvex said, activating another display. "I've been studying a human conflict called the Winter War between Finland and Russia. A small nation held off a superpower through superior tactics and environmental adaptation. The parallels to our current situation are concerning." The display showed primitive human fighters on white terrain, using the landscape and extreme cold to neutralize their enemies' superior numbers and technology. "Commander," a tactical officer interrupted, "human forces are deploying what appear to be decoy emitters throughout their asteroid belt. They're creating false fleet signatures that match our own." Another historical reference, Zarvex noted. Operation Bodyguard from their World War II, creating phantom armies to confuse invasion forces about the true landing locations. He pulled up another historical file, examining images of primitive human ocean vessels called Q-ships, civilian ships concealing heavy weapons, designed to lure attackers into a trap. "Alert all fleet captains," he ordered. "Approach any human vessel with extreme caution. Scan for energy signatures inconsistent with their apparent purpose." Zarvex turned back to Telemor's transmission. "The humans are implementing strategies from every major conflict in their history, adapted for space warfare. They're treating our technological advantage exactly as they've treated such advantages in their past, as puzzles to be solved rather than insurmountable obstacles." "What will you do, Commander?" Zarvex's outer eyelids closed briefly in what the Siltharans recognized as grave concern. "I'm implementing a tactical withdrawal to the outer system. We need time to analyze and counter their adaptations. The High Command will not be pleased." "The High Command does not understand what we're facing," Zarvex replied, his voice hardening. "These humans don't just study warfare, they evolve through it. Each conflict produces new strategies that survive in their collective knowledge. They're drawing on thousands of years of battle wisdom, while we rely on technological superiority alone." On his personal display, a final passage from Sun Tzu glowed with ominous relevance. "What is of supreme importance in war is to attack the enemy's strategy." Zarvex stood motionless before the communications screen, Watching as the captured Siltharan officer delivered his message, scales dull with stress, eyes darting nervously. Behind him, a wall displayed what the translation matrix identified as military patches from human conflicts spanning centuries. Imperial forces, the officer said, his voice cracking. The humans understand our communication protocols completely. They know our tactical formations, our shift rotations, even our emergency codes. He swallowed visibly. They're inside our decision cycle. They anticipate orders before they're issued. The transmission ended abruptly. Moments later, human broadcasts began flooding Siltharan communication channels, not with threats or demands, but with something far more insidious. The final communications of Siltharan crews before their ships were disabled or destroyed. Psychological warfare, Krevnar observed, his usual confidence diminished. They're weaponizing our own casualties. Zarvex nodded grimly, a strategy they perfected fighting each other. He gestured toward intelligence reports from the planetary surface. Look at their historical conflicts, Vietnam, Afghanistan, even their ancient Rome. They've refined these methods for millennia. On secondary screens, intelligence officers sorted through intercepted human communications. One caught Zarvex's attention, a transmission between human military leaders discussing Siltharan tactics. They're predictable, a human commander said. Hierarchical command structure, standardized responses, minimal battlefield adaptation. Classic symptoms of a species that evolved as apex predators. Another human voice responded, like fighting the Wehrmacht in 44, all technology and doctrine, no flexibility once you disrupt their playbook. Zarvex felt his neck frills contract with disturbed recognition. The humans were analyzing Siltharan military culture with unsettling accuracy, comparing it to their own historical adversaries. Commander, a communications officer reported, "We've captured a human vessel attempting to infiltrate the fleet perimeter." One survivor. The human prisoner was brought to the command center under heavy guard. She wore simple dark clothing with no visible insignia, her only identification a small metal disc with engraved characters. "You understand our language now," Zarvex stated, studying her closely. The human's expression remained neutral. "We understand more than your language, Commander. What do you hope to accomplish? Your technology remains inferior. Your planetary defenses cannot withstand concentrated bombardment." "Technology is just a tool," she replied. "Wars aren't won by technology alone." "Your strategy, then. These psychological tactics." The human's facial muscles formed what Zarvex now recognized as a smile, though her eyes remained cold. "This isn't strategy, Commander. This is memory." "Explain." "Your species fights wars as events, discrete campaigns with beginnings and ends. We experience them as conditions of existence." She gestured toward the tactical display showing the scattered Siltharan fleet. "Everything we're doing now, we've done before, to ourselves, for thousands of years. The names and faces change, but the methods endure." Zarvex felt a chill along his spine ridges. "You speak as if your species evolved specifically for conflict." "Not evolved, shaped." The human's gaze intensified. "Every major human advancement came from warfare, metallurgy, medicine, electronics, aviation, even space travel. War is our greatest teacher." After the prisoner was removed, Krevnar approached hesitantly. "Commander, fleet captains report increasing difficulties maintaining crew discipline. These psychological tactics, the broadcasting of distress calls, the targeted strikes against communication hubs, the unpredictable attack patterns, They are producing effects similar to combat neurosis. Because they're designed to, Zarvex replied. The humans aren't just fighting our ships. They're fighting our minds. He gestured toward the tactical display, where human forces continued their asymmetric strikes against Siltharan positions. They don't need to win conventionally. They only need us to believe we cannot win. Krevnar's scales darkened with concern. And your assessment, Commander? Can we win? Zarvex studied the battle data, watching as human tactics evolved with each engagement. Not as we expected to, he said finally. Perhaps not at all. 3rd Squadron lost contact with the supply convoy, reported the tactical officer, his scales pale with stress. Preliminary data suggests human forces using our own decommissioned scout vessels as attack platforms. Zarvex studied the tactical display where blinking red indicators marked the locations of disabled Siltharan ships throughout the outer system. No direct pattern was evident, exactly as he expected from his study of human guerrilla tactics. They are prioritizing targets according to the Mahan Doctrine, he observed, attacking our supply lines rather than our combat vessels. Krevnar looked puzzled. Mahan Doctrine. A human naval strategist from their 19th century, Zarvex explained. He'd argued that controlling supply lines was more important than winning individual battles. He gestured toward the display. The humans are applying naval warfare concepts to space, treating our fleet as islands dependent on supply chains. On a secondary screen, analysis of captured human vessels revealed something even more disturbing. The humans had not only adapted Siltharan technology, but had modified it in ways the Siltharan engineers found baffling. Where our Siltharan design emphasized elegant solutions and centuries-tested reliability, human modifications showed a reckless disregard for safety protocols and expected operational parameters. They've overclocked the reactor cores, the engineering officer reported with horror, running them at twice our maximum rated capacity. How? Krevnar demanded. The safeguards alone would prevent. They removed the safeguards, the engineer interrupted. These vessels will burn out within days of continuous operation, but until then, they'll outperform our own ships. Zarvex wasn't surprised. They are trading longevity for immediate tactical advantage. He recalled human historical records of kamikaze pilots and suicide bombers, concepts that had initially seemed incomprehensible, but now fit into a clearer pattern of human warfare. His attention turned to another report detailing a recent engagement near the gas giant humans called Jupiter. A small group of modified human vessels had lured a Siltharan patrol into the dense ring system of a moon called Europa. Once there, pre-positioned explosive devices had detonated, creating debris fields that shredded the Siltharan ship's sensor arrays and propulsion systems. They're learning our weaknesses with each encounter, Zarvex observed. Not just technological vulnerabilities, but doctrinal ones. The command center's main screen activated with an incoming transmission, not from another Siltharan vessel, but from Earth itself. The face of an older human female appeared, her expression grave but composed. Commander of the Siltharan forces, she began, I am Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Command. I offer you an opportunity to withdraw your forces from our system without further bloodshed. Zarvex studied her carefully. You must understand your position is ultimately untenable, Admiral. Despite your tactical successes, we possess overwhelming strategic advantages. The human's expression didn't change. We've analyzed your fleet composition and supply capabilities, Commander. You're operating far from your nearest support base with extended logistics chains we continue to disrupt. Your crews are experiencing increasing psychological stress under combat conditions they weren't trained for. She paused, allowing her words to register. We faced superior forces before, Commander, many times throughout our history. And yet you've never encountered anything like the Siltharan Empire, Zarvex countered. For the first time, the human admiral's expression shifted into what Zarvex recognized as the human smile, a facial configuration that could signal either friendliness or predatory intent. And you've never encountered anything like humanity, she replied. We don't need to defeat your empire, Commander. We only need to make conquering Earth more costly than leaving us alone. After the transmission ended, Krevnar approached cautiously. Your orders, Commander. Zarvex remained silent for a long moment, weighing options against his growing understanding of human warfare. Continue withdrawal to the outer system perimeter. Consolidate remaining supply vessels under heavy escort, and prepare a secure transmission to the High Command. Requesting reinforcements? Krevnar asked. No, Zarvex replied, his tone somber. Requesting permission to negotiate. This is unprecedented, snarled Fleet Marshal Dosreth, his holographic image dominating the command center. No Siltharan commander has ever suggested negotiation before achieving primary objectives. Zarvex stood firm, surrounded by his senior officers. Marshal, I've transmitted comprehensive tactical analyses documenting the unusual nature of this conflict. Standard protocols are proving ineffective against human resistance methods. Your analyses reek of defeatism, Dosreth countered. The High Command questions whether you've been influenced by human psychological tactics. Krevnar stepped forward, surprising everyone. Fleet Marshal, I initially shared your skepticism. However, the evidence is compelling. He activated a display showing fleet casualty rates and resource expenditure projections. We've lost 17 vessels and damaged 23 more. At current attrition rates, we'll exhaust our combat effectiveness before achieving planetary submission. Dosreth's scales darkened with disapproval. The Empire has never withdrawn from a conquest. Never. Until now, we've never encountered a species like humans, Zarvex replied. He brought up comparison charts showing conflict adaptation rates across known civilizations. Most species respond to superior technology with either surrender or religious fanaticism. Humans respond with innovation. He displayed footage of modified human vessels, employing Siltharan technology in ways Siltharan engineers had never considered. They've taken our standard shield configuration and modified it to create directional force projectors, he explained. They're using our own defensive systems as weapons against us. Dosreth studied the footage, his expression unreadable. And your proposal? A tactical withdrawal to reassess, Zarvex stated. The humans have demonstrated willingness to negotiate territorial boundaries. They don't seek our destruction, only their continued independence. Unacceptable, Dosreth growled. The empirical mandate is clear. All encountered civilizations must be integrated or eliminated. I'm dispatching Grand Fleet elements to your position. They will arrive within 15 planetary rotations with sufficient firepower to reduce human resistance to ash. After the transmission ended, the command center remained silent. Finally, Science Officer Velmar spoke. Commander, I've completed the simulation you requested. Zarvex turned to the display where a complex model showed projected human responses to overwhelming force. Based on historical data from human conflicts, the model predicted not surrender but escalation. Desperate measures, including planetary-scale weapons deployment and suicidal tactics. Even complete orbital supremacy won't guarantee victory, Velmar explained. Historical precedent suggests humans often fight most effectively when facing extinction. Their backs against the wall doctrine. Zarvex considered this soberly, and the projected casualties. Total human extinction would require sterilization procedures lasting approximately 2 standard years. Velmar's scales paled slightly. Projected Siltharan casualties, 37% of deployed forces. Krevnar's breathing gills fluttered with shock. 37% casualties against a pre-interstellar civilization. Impossible. Not according to human historical precedent, Velmar continued. During their Second World War, a technologically superior force called Nazi Germany attempted to conquer a less advanced nation called Soviet Union. Despite overwhelming initial advantages, the invaders suffered catastrophic losses to a combination of environmental factors, guerrilla tactics, and the defenders' willingness to sacrifice everything. Zarvex studied the projections silently, then made a decision that would forever change his standing in the Empire. "Prepare my personal shuttle," he ordered, "and contact the human command structure. Inform them I'm accepting their invitation to discuss terms." "Commander," Krevnar objected, "this contradicts the Marshal's direct orders." "I'm aware," Zarvex replied, "but I've studied enough human history to recognize a lost cause. If we continue this conflict, the best outcome is Pyrrhic victory, achieving our objective at costs so great they negate any benefit." He turned to face his officers directly. "The High Command doesn't understand what we're facing because they haven't studied these humans as I have. They haven't seen how war has shaped them into something unique in the galaxy, a species that grows stronger through conflict rather than being diminished by it." "And if you're wrong?" Krevnar asked quietly. Zarvex's outer eyelids closed briefly. "Then I've misunderstood the greatest military minds of human history. But I don't believe I have." The United Nations Assembly Hall fell silent as Zarvex finished displaying the holographic star chart. The vast chamber, hastily modified to accommodate his Siltharam physiology, contained representatives from every major human government and military organization. Many war expressions the xenopsychology briefing had identified as wary or suspicious. "This sector contains 27 inhabitable worlds," Zarvex continued, indicating a glowing cluster. 17 are already under the control of what we call the Hive Confluence. Admiral Chen leaned forward. "And their capabilities. Unlike the Siltharan Empire, which conquers to expand influence, the Confluence absorbs to increase biomass. They don't seek subjects. They seek raw materials, including sentient species." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Zarvex observed the humans exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from suspicion toward his species to concern about this new threat. "Why should we believe you?" asked a human representative. "This could be a deception to gain our trust." Zarvex had anticipated this. He activated another projection showing a devastated Siltharan colony world, buildings organic in design but shattered, landscapes scorched, recording devices showing chitinous creatures swarming over Siltharan civilians. "The settlement of Kelbarn," he explained. "Population 8 million. Now a confluence breeding ground." The room grew quieter. Zarvex continued, "The Siltharan Empire has contained the confluence for 3 centuries through superior technology and disciplined military doctrine. But recent expansion patterns suggest they're evolving new strategies, more adaptive approaches. Similar to human tactics, Tellamore added from her position beside him. But without your ethical constraints. General Santos, A human military leader with decorations Zarvex had studied spoke up. "You're saying these confluence creatures are learning to fight like us?" "Not yet," Zarvex replied, "but they show unprecedented adaptation rates. They acquire beneficial traits from consumed species. If they were to encounter humans..." He left the implication hanging. The assembly hall remained silent as the humans processed this information. "Commander," Admiral Chen said finally, "you came here against your superior's orders. Why risk your position, potentially your life, to propose this alliance?" Zarvex considered his answer carefully. "Because I recognize something in human historical records that the High Command cannot understand without experiencing it directly. Your species doesn't just develop technology or tactics. You develop entirely new paradigms of conflict." He gestured toward the diverse assembly. "Throughout your history, your greatest innovations came when different human cultures exchanged ideas, willingly or through conflict. The Siltheran Empire has expanded through superior force for millennia, but we've stagnated. We conquer, but rarely learn." A new voice spoke, an elderly human female using a mobility assistance device. "You need our perspective on warfare." "Yes," Zarvex acknowledged. "The confluence adapts biologically. The Siltheran Empire relies on technological superiority. But humans..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Humans transform conceptually. You reimagine warfare itself with each generation." The elderly woman nodded slowly. "We call it disruption. Changing the fundamental rules rather than just improving within existing parameters." Telemore stepped forward, addressing the assembly directly. "We're not proposing this alliance from desperation. The Siltheran Empire could continue containing the confluence for centuries. But containment isn't a solution. It merely postpones inevitable conflict." "What exactly are you proposing?" Admiral Chen asked. "A joint military initiative," Zarvex replied. "Siltheran technology and resources combined with human strategic innovation. Not to contain the confluence, but to defeat it permanently." He watched the humans carefully, noting how military leaders were already exchanging meaningful glances, how civilian representatives were whispering calculations of risk and benefit. "And the Siltheran High Command?" General Santos asked. "Will they accept this arrangement?" "They will," Zarvex said with certainty, "when they see its results. The Empire respects strength above all else. Together, we can demonstrate strength beyond anything either of our species could achieve alone." As the assembly began deliberating, Telemore spoke quietly to Zarvex in their native language. "They're considering it seriously. Your gamble may succeed." "It's not a gamble," Zarvex replied, watching the humans organize into discussion groups with remarkable efficiency. "It's the application of human strategic principles. As their general Sun Tzu wrote, the greatest victory requires no battle." "You've changed, Commander." "Yes," he acknowledged. "I've learned from our adversaries. Now they may become our greatest teachers."